The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Roundup September 2020 edition. So today I am accompanied by Saurabh, who is Senior Associate in our firm. So unlike others, similar to other times, we have a lot of content today also. So we'll be starting with the compliance calendar. So there are a lot of due dates which are coming up in September 2020. We'll be discussing Carota 2020, which is a recent regulation issued by the government. Even though we had a specific webinar on Carota last week, but we thought we'll briefly cover here as well if any of you missed that. There are some significant changes made in GST returns vis-a-vis issuance of GSTR 2B and some other return changes. We'll be discussing that, recent news, and we'll wrap up with the legal precedents. Starting with compliance calendar, in the month of September 21st is the date from which Carota 2020 come into force. We'll be discussing in detail in subsequent part of the webinar. What does it mean? September 30th is due date for many of the compliances under GST, starting with ITC for financial year 1920. It can be taken by 30th September and it has to be reflected in GSTR 3B of September, which will be filed on October 20th. Reversal relating to exempt suppliers under Rule 42, that has to be done by September 30th. Issuance of debit notes for financial year 2019-20, even though there is no due date of issuance of debit notes, but based on law as on date, to enable the customer to avail the credit, the companies should issue debit notes within 30th September and the customer should take credit as well. Issuance of credit notes for financial year 2019-20. And lastly, annual returns, GSTR 9C for financial year 2018-19. So there's no indication of government extending these dates. So there's a mammoth task which the taxpayers need to do. So as of now, annual returns for 18-19 needs to be filed by September 30th only. Coming to the Carota 2020. So how this journey started was that in the budget 2020, the government enacted Section 28DA of the Customs Act. The government issued notification of Carota 2020 on August 21, and the effective date of Carota is September 21. So just to understand how does the Carota will work is, there is an importer in India. So this green box indicates that he needs to possess certain information. We'll discuss in the subsequent slides what does this information mean. As far as foreign exporter is concerned, if he needs to get certificate of origin from the issuing authority in the foreign country, he needs to provide the certificate to importer. Importer imports the goods. He files bill of entry with certain additional information. We'll be discussing in subsequent slides what does this additional information comprise of with the proper officer. So even though we discuss this in detail in our Carota webinar, but just to give a context that the Carota is relevant only if an importer in India is importing goods from countries where India has preferential trade agreements and he's taking benefit of lower basic customs duty or exemption of basic customs duty while making the imports. So to sum up this slide, the importer needs to possess certain information and he needs to file bill of entry with certain additional information. And based on this, the importer will claim the benefit of preferential trade agreement. From proper officer perspective, he can deny the benefit of PTA if COO is incomplete, if COO has been altered, if COO has expired, and lastly, if the tariff of the goods itself is ineligible. Now coming to the information, these information needs to be possessed prior to import of goods. So it cannot be obtained post facto. So primarily the information relates to production process of imported goods, because this whole Carota deals with whether the imported goods are meeting originating criteria or not. So say for example, if you have imported goods from say Singapore, the whole objective of Carota is that the goods have been manufactured or originated in Singapore. So from that perspective, primary information is the production process of imported goods, whether the originating criteria has been fulfilled by imported goods, if the goods are wholly obtained as per the PTA or country of origin rules, the process through which the goods are claimed to be wholly obtained. If the goods are not wholly obtained, again production process involved and originating criteria, details of origin of each originating input material, additional criteria like de minimis rule applied, accumulation, cumulation, etc. And lastly, whether it's direct or back-to-back shipment. This information has to be kept at least for 5 years from date of bill of entry. So if you see, not only a lot of information which needs to be possessed by Indian importers who are claiming these PTA benefits, secondly, many of these information are almost impossible to be procured, in the sense that the Indian importer needs to reach out to the exporter. There may be challenges at the exporter's end also to share this information. So effectively, Indian importer needs to know how the exporter has produced these goods, what raw materials he has used, from where he procured those raw materials, etc., etc. Another important aspect is that even though the limitation period under customs law is 2 years, within 2 years they can issue show cause notice if unless there is a fraud suppression, etc. The Karotar are imposing requirement to possess this information for at least 5 years. As far as bill of entry is concerned, so we'll be discussing the disclosures, even though the government is yet to issue the revised format of bill of entry. So these boxes in gray color, these are already forming part of the bill of entry, like CO, reference number, date, item on which benefit is claimed, and the tariff notification. The additional requirements are, so firstly, the importer needs to declare that imported goods qualify originating criteria. So importantly, Indian importer has to certify effectively on behalf of the exporter that the goods are qualifying originating criteria. Again, a lot of responsibility is being put on Indian importers. Which originating criteria fulfill, wholly obtained, not wholly obtained, etc. Whether accumulation or cumulation principle has been applied. If CO is issued by a third country, is it a back-to-back shipment? And lastly, if goods are transported directly from country of origin or not. So now coming to the process of verification. So till now we have discussed that the importer needs to possess certain information. Secondly, importer needs to make certain declarations of bills of entry. And the purpose of both the information and declaration is that if Indian importer is claiming PTA benefit, then he's certifying, he's confirming that the goods have originated from exporter's country or not. Now coming to the process of verification by the authorities. So if proper officer believes that certain goods have not met originating criteria, then he will request importer to supply information and supporting documents. Rules specifically provide that importer needs to furnish these documents or information within 10 days. Importantly, the quantum or magnitude of information is that large that unless the importer community start collating this information now, they cannot collate in a short span of 10 days. If the proper officer is satisfied, he needs to give a written acceptance within 15 days. So in a sense, it's a certificate that originating criteria has been met. And if not, then there's a nodal officer in CBIC to which proper officer will submit the verification proposal, who will take up the matter with the issuing authority in the foreign country. Now, as far as nodal officer is concerned, if he has a doubt regarding genuineness or authenticity of the certificate, if he believes that the country of origin criteria has not been met or the claim is invalid, or on a random test check basis, he can initiate the verification. So he requests the issuing authority for the verification. Issuing authority is duty bound to respond to nodal officer within 16 days, 60 days, or the period as per the trade agreement. Again, if nodal officer is satisfied, he needs to accept the claim within 45 days. If not, then these actions can be taken. Preferential benefit can be suspended. The nodal officer needs to inform to issuing authority the reasons of suspension. But yes, if the importer requests, then he can import the goods subject to provisional assessment. And for getting the assessments provisional, importer has to furnish requisite security. Now, in case preferential claim is rejected, it can happen before verification request. The importer himself can relinquish the claim, or even before verification, the officer believes that the goods are not meeting originating criteria. After verification request, the circumstances for rejection can be where verification authority has not responded or has not provided the requisite information, or the information provided by verification authority is insufficient to prove that the goods are meeting originating criteria. So in all these situations, the claim can be rejected. Implications of rejection: goods have to be cleared on payment of full customs duty. Provisional assessment will be finalized on full duty. And in respect of identical goods imported from same exporter, preferential benefit will be denied. So these are the suggested way forward from our end, that for all imports which will happen post September 21, 2020, the importer should collate all these documents. As of today, there are less than 2 weeks to do this activity, and if needed, professional guidance can be sought. The importer should set up right internal processes so that whenever a new vendor is onboarding or whenever existing vendors start supplying new products, So whatever information is required under Karotar 2020, those are being taken. And lastly, the contract should have an indemnity clause that in case the overseas vendor uh, certificate is invalid or improper, because of which the preferential benefit is denied to the importer, then importer can stake claim of differential customs duty, interest, penalties, etc. Moving ahead on changes in the return system. So in last couple of weeks, the government has proposed introduction of GSTR 2B and some other changes. So we'll be discussing that. So this is a present process. So the taxpayer, he files GSTR 1 for outward supply. Based on that, there is a real-time updation and GSTR 2A is being generated. Sorry, when the seller files GSTR 1, 5 or 6, GSTR 2A for the taxpayer gets generated on a real-time basis. Then the taxpayer files GSTR 3B, which is a return. So what changes happen? So sellers will continue to file GSTR 1, 5 and 6, because of which 2A will be generated. So GSTR 1 data will be auto-populated in PDF form, which for reference purpose will come in GSTR 3B. So presently there are many cases where there's a mismatch between the outward supply details coming in GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. So an auto-populated report will be available to the taxpayer that these are the details of GSTR 1. Those will get auto-populated in GSTR 3B, but yes, the taxpayer has option to edit it if there is a discrepancy. From inward supply perspective, presently only indigenous suppliers details appear in GSTR 2A. So the government is amending its system. Going forward, the import details from the customs portal and similarly SEZ procurement details will also start appearing in GSTR 2A. There is a new report which will be available, which is GSTR 2B. So GSTR 2B will be essentially the details of inward supply which are coming in GSTR 2A, be it local procurements, imports, SEZs, procurements, etc. But yes, it will be frozen on 12th of next month. So because the due date of filing GSTR 1 is 11th, so the data will be frozen in GSTR 2B by 12th. Other features of GSTR 2B, the ITC will be divided into two parts, available, not available. Not available will cover two scenarios. One, where the ITC is beyond the due date. And second, where taxpayer is located in one state, whereas suppliers GSTIN and place of supply is in a different state. Typical example of portals, etc. So way forward for the taxpayers. So the taxpayer needs to record ITC details in 3B. So our recommendation can be that the taxpayer can use GSTR 2B as a basis, which is a frozen data. This can be used for applying restriction under 36(4), the 10% tolerance limit which is provided. But as far as follow-up with the vendors is concerned, because GSTR 2B is static and GSTR 2A is dynamic, so if a vendor has not reported the supplies, then it will not appear in GSTR 2B. So as far as follow-up with vendors is concerned, GSTR 2A should be used. Coming to the recent news, first, very important news that the government has notified amendment to Section 50, which talks about payment of interest on net tax liability. Because of legal reasons, the amendment could have been notified prospectively only, but immediately the government has issued a press release refraining the authorities to take up any coercive action for the past. So it is likely that this amendment will be made retrospective in times to come, and the authorities have been clearly instructed not to raise any interest demand on gross tax liability. Considering the economic crisis, the government has hinted that the GST rate on two-wheelers will be reviewed. The next GST Council meeting is likely to happen in next couple of weeks. A very important change with regard to MEIS benefit, which is available to export of goods. So on 1st September, the government has issued notification clarifying 2-3 things. One is that the MEIS benefit will be withdrawn from January 2021. The new scheme, which is RODTEP, which is rebate of duties and taxes on export products, will be introduced from this date. Another change which has been brought is that this benefit is restricted to 2 crores per IEC code for the period September to December 2020. In other words, if there is an exporter who makes significant exports, so for the period September to December, he will get maximum MEIS benefit of 2 crores only. The government has also provided that they have kept a budget of 5,000 crores for these 4 months, and if the total claims exceed this amount, then this 2 crore or other MEIS benefits will be proportionately reduced. In our view, this notification is amenable to challenge because from January 2020 till date, there have been clear policy communication from the government that MEIS benefit will continue till December 2020. There was no news or no communication that the amount of benefit will be reduced. In fact, there were assurances that the benefit will continue as it is only. So in our view, doctrine of promissory estoppel, legitimate expectation clearly applies in this case, and the taxpayers are considering challenge this notification in the courts. The Finance Minister and Prime Minister office, they are overhauling the entire basic customs duty on 300 plus items. So we can see totally fresh customs tariffs, and imported products are likely to attract more customs duty. ASEAN is considering review of trade pact with India. After very long, the SISTAT has initiated the virtual hearings. Now coming to the last part, which is precedents, which will be taken up by my colleague Saurabh. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Puneet. So for taking us through two of the important events that have spanned out during the last month, the Carota rules and the introduction of GSTR 2B. Similarly, on the judicial precedents front as well, the courts have covered large grounds and have rendered judgments ranging right from levy of service tax under the positive list regime to the transitional credits to disputes under dispute resolution schemes and so on and so forth. With this, we now move on to the first judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of Adani Gas Limited. This judgment entails the issue regarding service tax on supply of tangible goods services. There was an agreement of sale of gas to industrial customer or or the domestic customer, for which a different charge was collected. Along with that, and for provision of these services, there was requirement of installation of skid equipments. These skid equipments essentially comprise of the valves, pipelines, and electronic meters to measure the consumption that has happened. In lieu of these skid equipments, there was collection of gas connection charges. The revenue entertained a belief that these services are in nature of supply of tangible goods service on two criteria, that these services, these equipments are being used by the consumers itself, and the control and position has not passed on to the customer. So this is essentially the criteria which is required for qualification of tangible under the category of supply of tangible goods services. So the court dealt with the term use and whether these skid equipments are being used by the customer or not. They reached on to the conclusion that the term use shall be read contextually. The customers are also using it for the purpose of measuring the consumption. Therefore, skid equipments forms an intrinsic element for the supply of services in this case. Accordingly, the service tax will be applicable in this case. So this judgment will have a lot of relevance under the service tax regime as well as in the GST regime too. Some of the larger issue of whether service tax can be levied on supply of such equipments is already pending before several high courts in case of several telecom companies, and we are awaiting those decisions as well. So this will have a substantial impact because this is a larger bench judgment of the Supreme Court. So moving on to the High Court judgments, the first slide will be dealing essentially with the transitional credits. Yes, they do occupy an important place in the GST law for the kind of jurisprudence that it has given already. Also, the volume of the jurisprudence that it has already given. So before we proceed on to the transitional credits, it is important to revisit the background of this section 140. So initial disputes on section 140 had arisen because section 141 clause 1 provided that manufacturer or a service provider can carry forward all those SENVAT credits which were lying unutilized as on June 30th, 2017 under GST regime in a prescribed manner, and this manner was prescribed under Rule 117. This Rule 117 prescribed for electronic filing of a Form GST Tran 1, and they also prescribed a time limit of 90 days which got subsequently extended till December 27, 2017. Even then, the taxpayers could not carry it forward under GST regime owing to the technical glitches or due to other problems that they could not carry it forward. So the issue reached before several high courts. More often than not, they have extended the benefits to the taxpayer on the grounds that it is a vested right, and secondly that section 140 does not authorize central government to formulate a rule in respect of the time limits or limitations. Based on this, to curate in order to overrule these judgments, the legislature has come up with a retrospective amendment under section 140, empowering the central government to prescribe a time limit. This retrospective amendment has been brought into challenge before the Madras High Court in Amplexor, India. Notable that all these judgments which were in favor of the taxpayers are already pending before the Supreme Court. They are all for the period prior to the retrospective amendment, but yes, this issue has also been brought up. The previous judgments are not containing all these challenges. This will be a fresh challenge on this issue. The primary challenge is on the ground that section 140-74 is a repeal and saving section, which is actually protecting these transitional credits, and any retrospective amendment to take away all those rights is against the settled principles of law. The writ petition has been admitted, and we are awaiting for the judgment. This will be a landmark too. While section 140 clause 1 provided for carry forward of credit of manufacturer and service providers, will deal with section 140 clause 3, which specifically provides for dealers to carry forward SENVAT credit of excise duty, which otherwise will form cost for them. So section 143 clause 3 provides for carry forward of credit subject to certain conditions. One of the conditions is possession of a valid tax invoice or prescribed documents evidencing payment of duty under existing law. Now the existing law was amended, that is SENVAT credit rules was amended, and Rule 15 was termed as transitional provision and was inserted under law to prescribe credit transfer document as one of the documents that a manufacturer can issue in the name of the dealer, so that they can carry the credits under the GST regime. The issue before the High Court in this case was there was an investigation whereunder the department was denying excise duty credit based on excise invoices that were issued to the selling dealer. In this case, Downtown Auto is a Honda dealer which was purchasing cars from Honda Cars, that is the manufacturer also. Insofar as those purchases are concerned, there is no dispute about it because they'll always have an excise invoice to carry this credit forward. The dispute arises when the purchases are made from the dealers, who will always issue a VAT invoice. So whether VAT invoice is a document prescribed under the existing law or not is a question. Otherwise, also the High Court dealt with this provision, and the documents that were presented, based on that, they have interpreted this condition to mean that the dealers can showcase any document insofar as it is evidencing payment of duty. It is not required to necessarily have a credit transfer document itself. So this judgment has raised an important dispute for dealers, and this, for the time to come, there'll be a lot of disputes on this issue as well. Now moving on to the next High Court judgment, Joyshri Parol of the Guwahati High Court. It's not this is an interim order, but this issue is a vexed issue insofar as the issue of whether cesses will be granted an exemption when the basic excise duty or the basic customs duty have been already exempted by the notification. So this issue has a checkered history. In 2017, in the case of SRD New Trains, the Supreme Court held that when the basic excise duty or is exempt, the cesses levied as a percentage of those cesses, those duty shall also be exempt. Based on that, there were certain refunds that were granted to the taxpayers. And while this judgment was followed in Bajaj Auto later, which held the same position, but in 2019 only, the case of Unicorn Industries, this judgment was overruled by the larger bench, wherein it said that only basic excise duty will be exempt because specifically cesses have not been exempt under the notification. So based on this judgment, the revenue have started issuing show cause notice for recovery of those refunds that have already been granted. And this recovery proceedings were only challenged before the Guwahati High Court. The proceedings have been stayed, and the High Court has agreed to examine whether after the Unicorn Industries judgment is there whether the department is empowered to recover the refund that has already been granted or not. So this will be another landmark judgment which we are awaiting for. Moving on is an irony when the dispute resolution scheme is in itself having a dispute, has created its own set of disputes. When I say dispute under dispute resolution scheme, it sounds like an oxymoron situation. So moving on, in the first case in Jagdish Advertising, the taxpayer filed the declaration. In the declaration, it claimed a deduction of SINVAT credit that it had already used for payment of taxes earlier. The designated committee denied this deduction on the ground that SINVAT credit cannot be used for payment of taxes. But the High Court held that one of the most important principles that has been let down by in Karnataka High Court is that the designated committee is only empowered to verify the documents and not enter into the adjudication aspect of the issues, which are essentially leading to several disputes. One of which is again in the case of 7th Plane Networks, where under the demand was quantified orally only during the audit, and it was communicated to the taxpayer. The taxpayer agreed to the demand, but when it filed the DRS application, it was denied by the designated committee on the ground that this has not been quantified in written or through a written communication. Therefore, this DRS scheme shall not be applicable on this assessee. So the High Court directed the designated committee to take a liberal view. Essentially, this scheme is allowing benefit to the taxpayers, and it should be the endeavor of the designated committee to also extend this benefit to the taxpayers. So SVL DRS scheme has largely been successful, but yes, these disputes which have been created due to adjudication process that the designated committee is entering into is prima facie wrong, and the courts have taken cognizance of the same. Moving on to the next judgment in case of PV Enterprises and Goldwood Enterprises. This is in relation to service of order or judgments on GST Common Portal. So in this case, the taxpayer did not file a return. Under Section 62, the revenue is empowered to pass an assessment order to raise demand of the amount which has not been declared in the return only. So it passed an assessment order. It uploaded it on GST Common Portal. Section 62 provides that once the provides that the taxpayer can file this return, correct return within 30 days of the communication of the order, and the assessment order will then be withdrawn. In this case, the taxpayers received the physical copy of the order on a later date. From that date, they filed their return within 30 days. But the revenue denied it, saying that the 30 days from the date on which the GST Common Portal contained that order has already expired, and therefore they are not entitled to claim that benefit of withdrawal. See, though the High Court observed that under Section 169 clause C and D, there is an important aspect of communication of notices, etc. In that context, it says that the notices and orders can be communicated to the assessee on GST Common Portal as well as through email. So based on that, the High Court rejected the grounds that was raised by these taxpayers. Important to note that the uploading of order on GST Common Portal is a valid mode of service. So all the taxpayers shall be cognizant of any order that has been uploaded. It is also linked to filing of appeal also, which will be dealing in the next judgment, which has recently come, Gujarat State Petronet. In this case, the appellant filed an appeal, a manual appeal, because the order was not served on the GST Common Portal, and this appeal was rejected on grounds of limitation. The court observed that it is mandatory to file appeal online, and once the appeal has to be filed, it is requirement that the order is contained on the GST Common Portal, which will also create a link or a relationship between that appeal and the order. So that's how the law is worded, and therefore it was held that appeal was filed well within time. Important to note that these appeals have been already, the orders are getting passed, and there are several assessees who have already an order in original in their favor, and majority of them are filing it online. Notable that there is no provision under law which allows manual filing of appeal. So the taxpayers have to be cognizant of this, and will have to keep checking on GST Common Portal if there is any order passed against them in that context. Very, very important in that context. So moving on, with the next judgment, Perfetti Van Meli, who has the jurisdiction to issue show cause notice. The superintendent had issued a show cause notice to the taxpayer in this case. If you note that there is a circular under GST law which was issued right in July 2017, which empowered several and different officers on different powers and functions that can be exercised under the Act by them. So for issuance of show cause notice, only a deputy commissioner or an assistant commissioner is empowered to issue the show cause notice. The taxpayer therefore challenged it on this ground that superintendent cannot issue a show cause notice, and the matter has been admitted and this will be the final hearing will be conducted in due course of time. Again, moving on to another important judgment under GST law by the Gujarat High Court in Britannia Industries. Britannia Industries had a unit in SEZ. They received certain ITC which were distributed by ISD, and therefore they filed a refund claim of those IGST, which was those credits which were received to them by ISD. So this was denied on the ground that there is no provision under law which allows SEZ unit, which is the recipient of the goods or service, to file a refund. In fact, there are notifications which are specifically saying that the import of goods by an SEZ unit will always be duty-free or tax-free. So there is no question of having a refund claim at all. But this is a unique situation where when ISD distributes to SEZ unit, what happens in that case? The Gujarat High Court rightly examined the situation. It said that ultimately the SEZ unit is a taxpayer in itself, and it is making a zero-rated supply. There is no specific provision to bar such refund, and therefore the refund shall be allowed. Otherwise, it will lead to unnecessary cascading effect of taxes. So with this, we move on to the next judgment. Very, very interesting PIL. This was filed by Gaurav Yadav, requesting for classification of masks and sanitizers as essential commodities during this COVID-19 pandemic. This is on the ground that once the essential commodities, once the mask and sanitizer is classified as one of the essential commodities, it will lead to the situation where the prices will be regulated by the government only. One of the important aspects also is here that they also sought reduction in rate of GST on sanitizers, etc., from 18 to 5%. So the High Court rejected this PIL, saying that this is a policy decision that has to be taken by the legislature and the courts cannot interfere. For challenging any tax, it always has to be confiscatory in nature. GST is not confiscatory, therefore petition was dismissed in this case. So with this, we now move on to the rulings by appellate authority for advance ruling. One of the important rulings and important topic is mixed supply versus composite supply, for the reason that each and every agreement, each and every transaction has to be examined independently. In this case, there was supply of relocation management service to the client. So what is this relocation management services? Is a service to the employees of the clients to relocate from one location to another when there is a transfer or deputation to some other place. In that case, these services essentially involved luggage carrying, inbound services, domestic inbound services, etc. This could have been provided on a la carte basis, that the taxpayers can also choose what kind of services they want, and could have been provided on a package basis altogether. There was also a possibility that some of the services was not getting provided and was not being provided by the Carters India. Therefore, they were engaging certain third parties as well. So they filed an advance ruling seeking advance ruling on whether the supply will fall composite supply or mixed supply. The advance ruling authority essentially held that there will be no service at all in the first place when the services are getting supplied by the third parties, engaged directly by the client, and the payment is also directly being done by them. On the aspect of the other services that is getting directly provided by Carters India, they held that it is neither a composite supply nor a mixed supply, for the reason that there is only one service in the nature of relocation management service. For qualification as composite supply, we need at least two taxable services to qualify as one. So this ruling seems to be a correct ruling in that context. Another AAR is Ascender services. In this case, the taxpayer was arranging transport facility for its clients and employees at Tech Park. For that, it entered into an agreement with BMTC, that is one of the transport corporation of one of the states, for supply of dedicated bus service for every 50 passes that it purchases from it. And for this supply of services to the clients and employees at that Tech Park, they were charging facilitation fee. The question that came forward was whether the value of the bus passes received from BMTC is includable in the value of the facilitation services that is being provided to the clients and employees at Tech Park or not. For the ground that they are intermediary and they are not receiving any services, the services are essentially getting supplied to the commuters only. The contracts were examined. It was noted that there was no contract in relation to making the appellant as one of the agent or brokers that were appointed by BMTC. Therefore, this value was held to be includable within the facilitation charges for discharging GST. Moving on to the next judgment in Volvo Eicher commercial vehicles, this is related to reimbursement for extending warranty services. So there was one distributor which was which was appointed by Volvo. This distributor was providing repair and servicing of Volvo vehicles for Indian customers during warranty period. Now these expenses were getting reimbursed from Volvo Sweden, and the question was whether Volvo Sweden is the recipient of the service and what will be the place of supply of such services. In this case, the advance ruling authority essentially it held that the services are getting provided to the customers who bring their vehicles to them, and not to Volvo Sweden at all. So the appeal was filed before the appellate authority, and the appellate authority has held that the services are essentially being provided to Volvo Sweden only. They are the persons contractually who are the recipient of service. And this service will also qualify as composite supply of service, where supply of service will form the principal supply. However, it did not render any ruling on export of service, saying that it does not form part of one of the questions prescribed under Section 97 of the CGST Act. So now moving on to the authority for advance ruling in Dyson Chiral Technologies, the issue pertained to the one-time lease, annual and maintenance charges that were paid for taking a property for 33 years leasehold, and this property was taken for construction of laboratory. The ruling that was sought from the advance ruling authority was whether the one-time lease, annual charges and maintenance charges, the taxes which have been paid on that, whether that will be available as ITC or not. The advance ruling has held that Section 17(5)(d) will apply, because this land has been taken specifically for the purpose of construction of laboratory. However, the advance ruling laws cite that the services should have been availed necessarily for construction of laboratory. This is acquiring land on which the construction of laboratory will be taking place. Unless for the construction services, there will be a specific set of services that will be taken differently. So this ruling appears to be incorrect on that front. Now next is Parsa Infocom and Power Solutions. In this case, there was supply of computing solution. The applicant was essentially a subcontractor which was providing, or which was the role was to establish a data center and supply of necessary equipments. In this case, they were not constructing any immovable property. However, they sought a ruling that whether these services will qualify as a works contract or not. In this case, the AR observed that supply of goods and services are naturally bundled and in conjunction with each other, but they will certainly not qualify to be works contract. In fact, they will qualify to be composite supply, where principal supply will be of goods, because 80 to 85% of the supply was in relation to goods only. So this ruling seems to be correct on that front. Next is very, very important, Pragati Steel Castings. This is in relation to classification of railway parts. These parts were coupler heads, knuckle lock, rotary lock. These were getting provided to one of the buyers, which was further supplying it to Indian Railways. So the issue arose was whether this will be qualified as this will be classified as under chapter heading 8607 as parts of railway or under 7325. So the Advanced Ruling Authority observed that there are twin conditions. One is that the parts shall be specifically and solely principally be used only as a railway parts, and second is that they should not be excluded specifically from section 17. So both these twin conditions were satisfied in the instant case. Therefore, the Advanced Ruling Authority held that the parts of railways are rightly classifiable under 8607, attracting 5% GST rate. So one of the judgments we discussed earlier was in relation to Downtown Auto on having a CTD necessarily to avail credit by dealers or to transition the credits by dealers. While the High Court observed that any document is a valid document insofar as it is evidencing a payment of excise duty, to the squarely contrary to that High Court judgment, in this case there was a VAT invoice. The dealer was in possession of the VAT invoice. That VAT invoice had endorsement of the excise duty, but even then the appellate authority rejected this appeal, saying that we need to have CTD documents specifically. To be strictly speaking, the appellate authority is right in the context that it cannot go beyond the law itself. But now that the Gujarat High Court has extended the benefit, this can be taken well availed by all the dealers in that respect. So moving on, one of the very, very important rulings by the CSTAT in the case of Bharat Heavy Electricals. There is already a dispute going on whether cesses can be carried forward under GST, which were lying unutilized on June 30, 2017, just prior to GST law coming into place. So there is already judgment of the Sutherland Global, which is of the single member of Madras High Court. It held that the taxpayers are rightly entitled to carry forward these credits. That judgment was stayed. That is still pending its decision. Meanwhile, the CSTAT examined this issue. In this case, the taxpayer filed the refund of cesses which were accumulated on account of either abolition of taxes or due to GST law coming into being. This had accumulated to them because they had certain supplies to outside India, or they had deemed exports. So it had accumulated. They did not file a Rule 5 refund, Rule 5 of the Senbat credit refund, on the premise that they might be able to utilize under the domestic sales only. But that did not happen. While the excise duty credit got carried forward under GST Tran 1 form, the refund, the cesses kept lying unutilized under the last return only. So this was not carried forward. So the refund claim reached the CSTAT after getting rejections from two of the authorities, the original authority and the appellate authority. The CSTAT has held that credit is a vested right and it cannot be taken away or extinguished without a statutory provision to that effect. Under law, there is no provision which is authorizing the lapsing of such credit. So there is no reason to deny any cash refund to the assessee. So this judgment is also very, very important because there are several taxpayers who have this cesses which were levied between 2007 to 2015 and got abolished, which could not be utilized later. Now they can file a refund and get this claim based on this judgment of the CSTAT. So with this, we now come on to the end of our roundup today. We'll now be taking live question and answer round. The participants can raise their hands. This will be unmuting you. You can ask your questions. You can also write to us on the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.
So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take. Great. So we don't have any questions. So with this, we come to the end of our webinar. And yeah, I think we have Mr. Ravikant Dwivedi. Yes, sir. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Mr. Ravikant Dwivedi.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Ravikant.
So, as you said, the MEIS scheme is discontinued. So, what new scheme is applicable? Any new scheme introduced?
Sir, can you repeat your question? It's not clear.
Sir, as you said, MEIS scheme is discontinued from Jan. Any new scheme is applicable against this?
Yes, sir. Sir, government is bringing RODTEP scheme from January 2021, but the details of the scheme and the benefit which will be available, that is not yet clear by the government. So government will bring necessary notification, etc. in 1 or 2 months. But yes, we'll be having a new scheme.
Name of ROTTD.
Yes, sir.
ROTTD.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Ravinder Goyal, you have some question. We are unmuting you. You can ask your question. Mr. Ravinder? Mr. Ravinder Goyal, you can ask your question. Okay. So Mr. Ravinder Goyal's question is on BHEL judgment. Department is expected to go for an appeal. What is likely fate for this? What is your suggestion to contest or not? So in our view, it's a correct judgment and we should contest it. The credit was our vested right and the credit of cesses did not lapse. So the government ought to refund this amount to us. Next question is Nikhil Mendirata. Mr. Nikhil, we are unmuting you. You can also unmute and ask your question. Mr. Nikhil Mendirata.
Hi, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Nikhil. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the slides I read that you said that filing an appeal on the GSTN portal, which is basically the online filing of appeal, is a mandate at law.
Right.
And a provision for filing a manual appeal is not there and not contemplated by the law. So in case if a particular refund module, like if you check the modules, the refund, if you have a refund rejection order, you don't have a module available on the GSTN portal to file an appeal before the first appellate authority.
Right.
So in that case, what is your view? I mean, can we go for a manual filing? And just to add one more fact, I checked this with the GSTN grievance redressal cell. They also mentioned that since this module is not available, So you can proceed to probably email the authority or maybe file for a manual refund. But it is a very absurd communication. So what is your take on it?
So, Mr. Nikhil, you can file a manual appeal in this case, and in the cover letter, you should clearly mention that because the online filing module is not active, that's why you're filing this.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So with this, we come to the end of our webinar, and we thank you for joining in large number. And we'll meet you in next month for October 2020 Roundup edition. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.